Alright, let's get things rolling here. Look at me go being all quasi-professional with stream will start soon screens. I finally figured that one out. Took me a minute, but I got there. Let's see here. Where's our... Alright, our volumes are looking okay, I think. We'll find out if anyone yells at me that they can't hear me or whatever, then we can figure that one out when we get there. But I think we are good to go. We'll go just another minute in case more people want to trickle in here. And we'll get on with our nice, chill, couple days before Thanksgiving writing session here. Should be a nice way. I don't know about everyone else, but I like going into the holidays. Although, I mean, I'm excited about spending time with my family and everything over this holiday later in the week. But that said, I always like kind of cruising into a holiday at a nice like steady, calm, chill contentment, rather than going screaming into them. Either like way up here, excitement levels out of control, or opposite, is like so down low you got no energy left, right? I like to be at just like a nice, chill, mellow. So I feel like doing some writing and then just some chill gaming, over the next couple days are gonna be a really good way to get to that level. So let's see here. I say that as I drink my like 4th cup of coffee today, amping myself up with as much caffeine as I can muster. That's alright. Okay, I think we are probably in a good place to go ahead and get started. So let's just do that. There we go. So let's see here. Let's recap a little bit here. We're working on our campaign. Campaign that is the basic storyline of this campaign. We have. Oh, sorry, you guys can't see or hear it, but my cat is flipping out right now. So, I was just saying, I prefer to be at a nice like low chill. No, not my cat. Not my cat. We're. Oh, yeah, there's you can see her zipping around in the background. I widened out the camera so you can see her zipping down just a little bit there. Little psycho. She's very excited right now for some reason. Hard to say exactly why, but at any rate. What was I saying? Right. So just recapping. We're working on building a campaign that'll run players. I mean, we're doing D&D 5e here, all homebrew stuff. At least in terms of setting and story, all homebrew. But D&D 5e, and we're making a campaign that's intended to span roughly levels 1 through 10. At the very least, I'm designing it for levels 1 through 10. Depending on how players approach things, they may finish off a much lower level, or they may, go through and do a whole lot of the side stuff and make sure they're just completionists about it all and get themselves above there. But we're designing it for levels 1 through 10. And the basic premise is, right, this world is our post-unhinging world, where there was sort of a calamity event called the Unhinging that kind of messed up everything just a little bit. And that caused pretty much most of the world to slip into chaos and divided the world into 2 basic areas. There's the areas that are the guarded, protected, walled-off cities that pretty much everyone lives in, and then there's the wilds. And the wilds has been just sort of a place of pure chaos and insanity. And it has really been the domain only of horrible monstrosities and whatnot. And horrible monstrosities and adventurers. Those are pretty much the only people out there in the wilds. But things have been kind of calming down, and a lot of the cities are trying to reclaim parts of the wild. And in part of that effort, there's one city that's trying to build a new, more direct trade route between itself and another city that, until this point, it has been necessary to travel weeks or months from city to city to follow the one main trade route that's there, but they're kind of cutting through and creating a new one. In the process of doing that, though, they've upset a dragon who kind of looks over the plains that they're trying to make their road go through. Dragon's not too happy, but he cuts a deal with the player. Says, "Hey, there's this place called the Hall of Wisdom that I'm trying to get into. Been locked out my whole life. I want to know what's in there. If you can help me find the keys to that, I will let you build your road." And so the players are working on doing that. And so then that brings us to what we're currently writing, which is a dungeon that is, and actually we can pull up our map here so we can just kind of look at it, right? So here's that road that they're trying to build. This is as far as they make before the, hi kitty, what are you doing? I don't like how big your pupil is as you're staring at me to possibly jump on my lap right now. we may have a guest appearance in a moment here, which is fine. We can take a moment for that. Did you want to come up, honey? Or are you just staring? Yeah, we're just staring. Okay. Sorry. It's a cat. You can't just not pay attention to. Oh, there she is. There's her little tail. Yeah, she wants to sit on the lap. Okay. Well, that's fine. We can accept a little fuzzy friend on our lap. I mean, who in the world would be upset about that, right? Have to be some kind of monster. So, what was I saying? Right, so here's the road that the players are trying to get access to. We've already done the first leg of this journey, which is to find the key that is along this chain, this little trail of adventure here, right? So they have to go through there. And now we're working on one that's led them either along here or down through here, depending on the route they want to take and their reasoning behind it. They're now working their way through the mountains to eventually make it to this city called Kagdaral. We can actually zoom in, right, to see. So here we are. This is sort of the travel. It goes through the mountains, right? They have to do some traveling through the mountains. And eventually they'll reach this little area here called the Lost Tunnels, and that's what we're working on. And the Lost Tunnels are basically just a sort of collection of labyrinth-like chambers that the dwarves of old in the city of Kagdaral had built as sort of a final defenses, right? If someone was invited into the city and welcome in the city, they would know how to get through the labyrinth, either by being guided or by they themselves knowing it. But if they weren't invited, then it's a labyrinth, and they would get lost and separated from their group and everything like that to make it easier for the dwarves to repel any sort of intruders or bring in any sort of intruders, depending on what they want to do with them. So that's what the players are trying to get through. And that's what we've been working on. So let's go ahead and get back to it. So this is our map. We have finished. Oops, no, that's not what I wanted to do. Go away. Not mean to compare levels. So we finished off. This is the first section here. They're not so much levels, but it's just easier to do them as levels within this program. I'm using Dungeon Draft. And it's easier to separate things out in levels as they put them. It's sort of conceptually designed to be stories, because I'm sure their thought is, if you need more space in a single story, then you can just make the map bigger. But I limit my size just to make sure that files don't get too big for my players to try and load when we're doing virtual, and because the size of this matches the size of the game board that I have when we're playing in person, so it's easy for me to just one-to-one transcribe it over. So instead of doing wider, I'm using the different levels to be able to make just different sections, right? So here's where they enter. This is the first section. We have finished the second section, which kind of comes over here and occupies this corner. We are now working on the third section, which kind of occupies up here. And then the fourth section, which will occupy that corner, will be the last thing we work on. So there's section 2, already finished. And now we're working on section 3. So let's go ahead and get back to working on it. You see we've got a few rooms done, and we have already taken the time to sort of map out what's going to be in each room. So at this point in time, we're really just kind of describing the details of each room and just kind of putting stuff in there as needed to entertain our players. So let's see here. So room 5, go back and just zoom in and take a look here. It's empty now. We have to, I always like to fill in the rooms after I've described what's going to be happening in that room, just to make sure that the picture represents what I know is going to be in there. If I try and decorate it beforehand, I'll just have to change a bunch of stuff anyway. So But this is the space we have to work with, which is the same as any other space in this room. This dungeon, just to address it, this dungeon is extremely monotonous and like monotone, and that's on purpose. As I was describing, this dungeon is meant to be sort of a labyrinth in which people would get lost and confused while trying to travel through it. So we want this to look the same. We want this to feel like a drudge, like a trudge through all kinds of just monotonous, slogging, painfully similar and familiar rooms. We want it to feel that way. I don't normally design my dungeons that way, because normally I would say it's bad for things to feel monotonous and boring, but that's the attitude we're going for in this particular dungeon. So, job well done. It looks nice and boring, and that's on purpose. It does make it easy to design things, though. It's my hope is really that it's not boring to play through. My hope is that it just feels like a very old school style of D&D to play through this dungeon, right? Where it's just you're in a dungeon. You're in a dungeon and you're going room to room. You fight the monsters, deal with the traps, get the prize, and move on. Right? That's what I want it to feel like, truthfully. And that can feel like a bit of a slog, which is sort of, like I said, that's sort of what I'm going for. Hey, how's it going? Live and let's die. Oh, good to see you. Glad to have you here. So in this room here, we're gonna put in hard battle, and we've already sort of figured out how many experience points worth of challenge should be in there, and that should be about 1,300 XP worth of challenge here. So let's see here. Everyone loves a good dungeon crawl from time to time. That's the hope. And like I say, I do my very best to not have all of my dungeons fit that same mold. So in a way, I'm hoping that the classic monotonous dungeon crawl feels like something fresh, unique, and interesting. Just because it's 100% not what I usually do. And it's really, we haven't done anything like this in this campaign so far. And we're on the 4th of 10 dungeons planned for this campaign, so we're like almost halfway through and we haven't even used one of these, so you gotta put one in somewhere, right? Alright, let's see here. So if this is going to be a difficult one, we don't want to use our vampiric mist. That's going to be, we already did that actually. That was in our boss battle up here. So that pretty much just gives us, we can just hit them hard with a bunch of the ochre jellies and that would get the job done. We could do 2 of those or 2 specters too. There's a lot of options available to us here. We could overwhelm them with just a whole crap ton of specters. They would hate that though. That would actually be pretty brutal given how the specters work, where they just grapple and leech your life. That would be kind of a brutal battle. That one would get very tough very quick. I don't know. I like the idea of let's do the 2 ochre jellies and 2 specters. I think that's a good balance. I think that'll be good. That gives them plenty to think about. And it will be a tough battle, but that's, it is our pre-planned difficult battle. So, I would hope that it was difficult. That's the point. Alright, so we got that, and then specters. 200 experience points apiece. Let's see here. Should play a lot. So yes, absolutely. Talking about draining resources and everything, and that's 100% what I'm going for with my dungeons. So my dungeons get stepwise bigger and more difficult is what I do as players level up, to the point of like at level 10, which is sort of the target ending point of this particular campaign. At level 10, they'll be going through a mega dungeon that has somewhere in the vicinity of about 100 rooms. And it's 100% to sort of design it to drain resources, make them have to think about resource management, time management, things like that. Because I do think that it is a common theme, and I'm not necessarily saying that this is wrong, because if this is the style of game that you and your players like, then more power to you. But generally speaking, I think it is a thing that the current scape of D&D um, is very, very focused on role play type of situations, and that's in large part thanks to the growth of there are so many different D&D podcasts, which to make a podcast interesting, it has to be very story driven, and so because of that, there's this very role play heavy focus. Oh, thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Glad to have you here. Um, but there's this tendency to focus so heavily on that role playing that the sort of spirit of the dungeon crawl and like the game mechanics of it tends to get pushed by the wayside, so that there really is the tendency to make it so that players can, they get into a fight and then immediately take a long rest, right? And so that sense of that almost that sense of danger is kind of gone. And I notice that a lot with my players, where like they're sometimes, even though they're used to my campaigns and the way I do them, there's the tendency to, as soon as like a little bit of pressure gets put on, they get really scared really fast. And it's because they're not used to the concept of their characters being in danger. But to me, that's kind of the point of a lot of the game mechanics, is for things to feel dangerous. So I like to create these big, long, hefty dungeons for them to have to sort of slog their way through, because that's the core, like that's what sets them apart from any other NPC character living in this fictional world that we have here. If the players balk at everything more than a couple giant rats, then they're no different than a guy just trying to keep the varmint out of his bar, right? Like they're going into a dangerous world facing dangerous things because the average person is incapable and unwilling to face that kind of danger, right? These guys are meant to be heroes, and heroes have to face a lot of struggle. And so I've found that my players, despite the fact that they oftentimes will look at an encounter and feel very overwhelmed by how challenging it can be, ultimately it gives them a really strong sense of reward when they finally do make it out of these dungeons, get through, get their rewards, get back out to safety, and then can do their role-playing sections back in the city, right? They have that sense of reward and that real sense of like, wow, we actually accomplished something and we're actually heroes here. So I'm 100% with you. I like the long dungeons. I like trying to drain their resources and make them feel the squeeze a little bit, because that's just, like I say, that's what sets them as player characters apart from any other NPC they might encounter there, right? And to me, that's a really important component of why we play D&D, as opposed to just throwing on Skyrim and using mods and cheats to feel like a god, right? Like, it's supposed to be, yes, team storytelling. It's like a group improv storytelling thing, certainly. But if we didn't want to have the game mechanics and the dungeons involved, then, I mean, we could just sort of sit there and, work together to write a play or something. So that's to me an important part of it, and that's why I like my dungeons to feel heavy and dangerous and scary, because that's the spirit of it, right? I mean, look at the original rules of D&D. Like, the original rules were brutal. Like, poisoned wasn't, oh, I'm in trouble and I might lose some of my hit points. Poisoned was like, yeah, no, you've been poisoned and you die. It was so dangerous and so frightening and disturbing, and the whole point of it was trying to make it as far as you could through the dungeon, and the things have like evolved and all that kind of stuff, but there's a lot of danger involved, and I don't like completely abandoning that, because again, that's what the game mechanics are. So let's see, what do we got? Yeah, no, I think your analysis is spot on. The concept of, like, when you're putting it in a podcast format, you need that collective storytelling. It almost needs to sound like a book on tape, right? That's how you do it. But when you're playing with your friends, you're not tied down by that requirement, so you can really get into the game of it. You can really get into the game of it. And in a lot of ways, I like my dungeons to feel almost like a board game, right? I tell my players all the time, like, there's a lot of blatant game mechanics that don't necessarily have a role play component to them, right? Like, I have my homebrew enchantment token system, which is 100% just like, yeah, there's a random ass coin that there's no reason for it to exist, but it's imbued with a spell that you can then use to enchant and imbue whatever items you want with it, right? That's one of the rewards. 100% game mechanic. There's not really a narrative to explain it there, but it's a game mechanic and it's fun, and it gives them the opportunity to build their own legendary weapons rather than just hoping I decide to chuck one randomly in a chest or something like that, right? It's a very game mechanic thing, and from a storytelling standpoint, it would be very boring and nonsensical and wouldn't really work. But when you're just playing a game with your friends, it's a really fun thing for everyone, right? And so it's the difference between listening to a story and playing a game. And when you're talking about your own game that you're playing, you're a lot less tethered down by that kind of stuff. And so, I like to use that freedom to its fullest and really make a nice actual game on top of the story. I mean, there's plenty of story baked into what we're writing here, but make no mistake, this is a game we're playing, and there are a lot of strategies that will and won't work, and I don't mind players getting a little meta with that. In fact, I kind of designed my dungeons to be that way. If you notice, like this dungeon, right? So this dungeon has 4 sets of 10 rooms essentially, and all of the monsters, as they get more and more difficult, the deeper into the dungeon they go, they all fit similar themes, right? We have a lot of spectral type of like non-corporeal enemies, and then a lot of jellies, the oozes and the slimes and the jellies and all that kind of stuff. And so as they get more difficult, they are all still fitting that theme, so that players can, in a meta sense, sort of learn, oh, if we're facing these spectral creatures, these types of attacks are not going to be that effective. So that means this other type of attack that is effective, we have those players be our heavy hitters, and the rest of us kind of hang back ready to heal if we need to. And it's okay for things to get meta because we're playing a game that way. If you're telling a story in a podcast, it doesn't come off as well. The flow isn't quite as satisfying for a listener that way. So you want to avoid that when you're making a podcast. But luckily, I don't play to make a podcast. I stream my writing here, and then I just play it privately with my friends. So I'm not tethered down by that kind of stuff, which is great. Pro characters, make it stronger. Yes, absolutely. No, you describe it 100%. 100% the reason why I created that enchantment token system. I always hated, when I was first getting into DMing, I always hated when my players would be like, I have the shield handed down for generations through my family. And the first time they find, and it's like they describe it as this really ornate, dented and battle-worn, but still ornate and meaningful shield. And then the first time they find a +1 buckler of looking ugly or whatever it is, they're suddenly like, oh, well, I mean, it's +1. I can't avoid that. And so then they chuck the heirloom and don't care about it. And that always felt like such a shame to me. So I was like, well, why don't I just give them the tools to make their own legendary items? And I always think about it like the scene in Kung Fu Panda when he's going through the hall that has all of those artifacts that all have these really cool, rich histories and powers to them. And I was like, rather than players finding those items, why aren't they just making their own so that in 2,000 years, other NPCs would look at their items sitting in a museum and think, wow, what heroes they were. Because that's what they're doing. They're turning into heroes. So, I think that hits the nail on the head, and it's 100% matches sort of my philosophy about how I write things and how I like to lead my games. So, let's see. I'm supposed to be writing, aren't I? No, it's fine. I love the discussion. I love the discussion, which is 100% why I stream my writing rather than just quietly writing on my own, which would be probably a lot easier to do, honestly. But I don't know. The conversation is fun. It's fun to hear other ideas that other people have. Let's see. Actually, before we do that, let's describe our room here. So it'll be kind of monotonous here. We do need to add a DM note here. And I can just copy and paste a note just to save myself a little bit of time here. We can just take this here. Yeah, this is what we can do because because we have the specters and oozes and everything everywhere, we can kind of copy and paste a lot of our own work here, which will save us some time. Oh no, you got nothing to apologize for. Like I say, I like the conversation. I hear a lot of good ideas from it, and one of the motivations I had for starting to stream my writing is so that we could discuss, and this could be sort of like a live Q&A session for any new DMs or new players who are looking for inspiration or looking to try and sort of understand what goes into creating a campaign, because I've been DMing for quite a few years at this point in time, and I know that I have a lot of experience. I don't know if I'd call it wisdom, because it kind of depends on what your group is and what your interests are, but I have a lot of experience at least that can help inform people. So I really enjoy the conversation, so you got nothing to apologize for. If I didn't, like I say, if I didn't want the conversation, I could ignore chat, or even better, just not even bother streaming. How long have I been DMing? Let's see here. I mapped this out a while ago, and then I forgot all of it. So I first started playing D&D my freshman year of college. Well, it wasn't D&D. I first started doing tabletops when I was a freshman in college, my first year in college. And that was, shockingly to me, anyway, that was 10 or 11 years ago. I don't know. I can't do the math exactly in my head right now based on like what semester it would be based on when the semester is. It was like, we'll say 11 years ago is when I first started playing. And I first started playing Call of Cthulhu. And so that was my first experience, actually, was Call of Cthulhu. So, and maybe that informs why I'm not afraid of a difficult dungeon, because Call of Cthulhu is very much that old school concept of like, yeah, you're facing these horrible ethereal monsters. If you screw up, you die. Better run fast. Like that's the concept behind it in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, I've been playing tabletops for that long. My first D&D game was a couple years after that, when my sister folded me into a game that she was playing with her friends. And then I went to grad school, and I wanted to do some more playing, but none of my nerdy grad school friends had ever played tabletops before. And though I had never DM'd before, I was like, well, I at least know how the game works, so I guess I can try this. And so I started doing that. And so if I'm mathing out the number of years ago, I guess that means I've been DMing for, I guess it would be about 6 years at this point. 6 or 7 years, like I say, depending on like what time of year I first did it. So yeah, a handful of years. And I actually, slipping into DMing was a very easy transition to me, or for me, because even as far back as high school, I have enjoyed world building as a hobby. Just like ever since the first time I watched my sister play Myst on the computer, I've been fascinated with the concept of creating a world just with words and maybe some drawn pictures, but like creating a world that has a rich tapestry of history, lore, rich cultures and everything in it. That's just all completely fictional. It was such an interesting idea to me, and so I started kind of with that hobby, and I would write fantasy and sci-fi like societies, and sometimes it would be just a short story, and other times it would be describing an entire location. And over the years, it's kind of turned into an amalgamation where I've got the world that I have, which is where this is my fantasy world, and then beyond that, and actually I consider this fantasy world just one of the many worlds within my sci-fi universe that I have that I like to write. And I haven't spent much time doing sci-fi stuff lately. I've been much more invested in this D&D fantasy type stuff. But yeah. So I guess that's a really long TED Talk answer for your question. I've been DMing for about 6 years of my life. And then as far as other games go, like I said, I've played Call of Cthulhu. I've played Pathfinder and D&D, which in a lot of ways are, similar but different. What other games have I played? I've done a lot of unique one-shots that were of various depth of rules. I don't know that I could list all of them. I played Mutant Year Zero, and that's a fun one. And I own a few others. I've kind of become a collector of rule sets, but I have yet to convince other people to play some of these other ones. And some of these other ones include, I've got Starfinder, which I intend to play one of these days. I think that's the easiest sell because it's very well known. And then the other two that I am really interested in is there's Legend of the Five Rings, because samurai are awesome. And that would be a rad game to play. And then the other game that I have that I will one day convince people to play at least a one-shot with me is the Princess Bride tabletop role-playing game. And so help me, I will find people to play that one with. It will happen one day. I don't know when. I don't know what it'll look like, but I'm going to make it happen. It is going to happen. Hey, Prince John John, how's it going? Random question. I think a Bullet would eat slimes. So I would think, okay, so here's my off-the-cuff answer. I think it would try, but I think the slimes would make it difficult. I guess that's what I would say. I guess that's what I would say. I don't know. I might need more context to really get it, but I don't think the slimes would go down easy. It's not like a Jello shot, these slimes. These slimes are a bit more digest you, and so they might. So, like, I could see it happening, but then the slime would, like, just, like, digest its way out of the thing, like, digest it from the inside out. So, I guess, like, in the basic term, I could see a Bullet eating a slime, but would it be a functional thing? Probably not. And so that makes me wonder if it would be like a poisonous insect type of thing where, you know, the lizards would be like, oh, that one's red, better avoid that one. Like, it would just turn into that type of situation. Because I always figured the slimes are just kind of like quasi-sentient molds, right? Like as in a mold that we see everyday life. Like, you think about black house mold or whatever. It's like a slime is just a quasi-sentient, fast-moving version of that. So, I don't know. I'm drifting off topic with it, but as a short answer, I could see it happening. I could see it happening, but I think it would have disastrous results. Let's see. I've been interested in Legend of the Five Rings. Playing stream. Yeah, you know, I've got some my friends that play have said they would be interested in streaming, but I always have to remind them that it requires that they be much more consistent with their scheduling and maintaining their schedule than any of them have ever been. So I don't know. I don't know that it would ever happen. I think it would be fun. I think it would be fun. But as it stands right now, I don't actually stream my games because the only games I play with are games that I play with groups of friends that started before I started streaming. And I don't want to disrupt the fact that those games are for us to just hang out as friends. Like, my worry is that because, you know, exactly the reasons that we talked about how by not streaming and not doing a podcast, we're free to do a lot more number crunchy type stuff and take our time going through things. I don't want to change that because that's what we've all really enjoyed doing with our game, and so I'm hesitant to change it. But that said, it's always kind of in the back of my mind that it would be fun to stream our sessions. Let's see here. I don't think slimes have a natural predator. Yeah. I think that if they did, the predators would learn to not prey on them very, very quickly. Man. I think the slimes would be useful to be eaten. Force themselves to eat something that would hurt them to eat it. Yeah. I think the second half of that is the most important one. I think the Bullets. I feel like one Bullet might notice another one getting digested in like a stomach thing on the inside, you know, like a big hole in their stomach where the slime got out, and think like, yeah, maybe we'll avoid those ones. As far as nutritionally, I feel like a slime could be nutritional. I mean, a slime digests everything that it goes over, which includes all the nutrients and everything. So I imagine they would be like just a big giant Jello vitamin, like a gummy vitamin. So like nutritionally, I could see that, but because they're essentially flowing stomach acid in a lot of ways, that's the hard part. That's the hard part right there. CR7 or higher ooze boss. You could always just homebrew modify an ooze. Find an ooze that you like and slap on some extra health and a couple extra abilities. Maybe throw on an extra attack per turn or something like that for it. The other option that you could always do, and I do this a lot, is find a monster that has, regardless of what the rules, regardless of what that monster is, find a monster that has pretty similar abilities to what you're looking for, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be a slime or an ooze, but something that has kind of similar ideas. You know, maybe has like the spider climb so it can go up walls, has the ability to grapple and engulf and share spaces. So a lot of a lot of non-corporeal enemies could probably kind of fill those shoes. And then you just like flavor it as an ooze. You could always do it that way too, and I do that a lot, especially when it comes to like animals and things like that. If I'm sitting there, I'm like, I have a very specific idea in mind, or it's like, or if it's like, I need I need a I don't know, like a tiger, but I need it to be this difficult or that difficult, as opposed to what the standard tiger is or whatever. Then I'll find a similar monster like a hyena or whatever that's the right level of difficulty, and then just call it a tiger. So you can always take that approach too. Those are some good ways to do it. Um, yeah, you're absolutely right though. In person, in person versus online, very different. Very different feels. Both wonderful in their own right, but definitely very different, different atmospheres. And that's one thing that I like about my group is we have our weekly session that we play online. Um, uh, we have our weekly session that's online, and then when stars align and our schedules are free, either for a weekend or we're all just willing to use some paid time off and play hooky for a day, then we'll get together and play in person when we can. It's been a while since we've been able to do that because we're all adults with adult life, but we do play weekly online, and so it's kind of really nice. We kind of get the best of both worlds. I do like your guys' creativity with the naming, though. Booze the boss ooze. Speaks only in a bassy voice. I like it. I like it a lot. It's good stuff. So what on earth am I working on again? Oh yeah, we're working on our dungeon. These are awesome questions though. These are awesome questions and really good discussion topics. I really enjoy it. Genuinely. I'm not just saying that to try and build my audience. Like I genuinely feel that way. If my audience grows because of it, then hey, have my cake and eat it too. Because it matters how big my audience is, because clearly I'm making millions off of this stream. Alright, let's see here. No, I'm glad you guys are here and we're getting some cool discussions in. It's fun stuff. Like I say, that's kind of what makes it worth the time to go through the trouble of streaming it rather than just writing stuff. But let's see here. So, we can just offer a generic description of this one. Walking into this room feels like walking into every other room in this dungeon. A central statue surrounded by musty, moldy walls deep under the mountains. Boom. Just describe that, and then they can have, and we also throw in, I don't know, you can say, well, we can just describe the monsters attacking them based on whether or not they see them and all that kind of stuff. Let's see here. Hey, Kickstand, it's been a minute. Doing all right. Doing all right. Look at you building up your book collection. That's awesome. That's awesome. I feel ya. Mine is growing somewhat extensive myself these days, so I can definitely relate to that. Oh, but you're saying on D&D Beyond there. I see. Still. Like, I like to collect the physical books. Like, even though I use D&D Beyond probably more so day to day, there's something about those physical books that just, it feels good. It feels good to have them. Maybe that makes me old school. I don't know. I'm starting to acknowledge in my life, like with all these questions about how long have I been DMing and all that kind of stuff, I'm starting to acknowledge that I'm at the point now where, like, there are things about me that might be considered old school by some people in today's day and age, which is weird and perhaps a little uncomfortable for me to face the truth of, but it is what it is. It is what it is. Let's see here. So playing a solo campaign, I've done that before actually. I use that as a creative writing exercise where I'll play a chunk of a campaign just on my own. Like I'll kind of create characters, play a chunk of a campaign, and then just sort of as a writing exercise, kind of write the tale of what they were doing. So, okay, let's see here. So we need to put in some sort of lore item here. So the lore items in this dungeon, I always like to, I like to try and I'm trying to make a conscious effort to include more lore items into my dungeons. I always try to add some, but I'm making a more concerted effort to add a lot of them just to add flavor. It's mostly because I realize like it's such a shame to have all of the history that I've written into this world over the years and not forcefully shove it down the throats of my players. So No, not necessarily for that, but it gives context, and it gives sort of feeling and sort of a sense of immersion, even in the middle of all of these sort of grindy, stat-heavy portions of a game for my players. Um, I'm trying to make a more focused effort on adding lore, and in this dungeon, right, this labyrinth um, is the players trying to make their way to Cogdoral, the abandoned dwarven city, the city that everyone sort of has accepted for centuries has been abandoned, right? When the unhinging first happened and the world first got sort of thrown into the chaos, the dwarves were forced to leave because the Terran reality happening within the mountains kind of made their city um, get overrun by all kinds of monstrosities and everything. So everyone sort of knows that this city is abandoned. What they don't know is that since that time, the Duergar have quietly come into existence and taken over this city. And so the lore bits that I'm trying to add are like, it starts off as just like bits of history about like the dwarves trying to flee, and then it's like slowly drifting more and more into hints and clues that that the Duergar are there, um, and just to kind of give them, because the dungeon's going to finish with them being captured by the Duergar, is sort of where this is going. And so I'm trying to add lore bits, and so I've mostly done little journal entries about like people. The last entry is talking about the unhinging and like everything's going to chaos and all this kind of crazy stuff. But I need to start. I want to find first off. I want to think of things other than journal entries, because that gets a little repetitive if it's always just like, oh wow, these people were like, I didn't know dwarves were famous for their journaling habits. And the other thing too is I want to start drifting them more towards clues of Duergar. So I kind of like, I've added little clues about like how a dead dwarf with like very ashen skin, and so there's just sort of this confusing thing of like, how old is this body? It looks a lot more fresh than anything else. So let's see. Holy crap, you guys are writing a book over here. Hold on. Let's see here. Nice. Wow. Yeah. Sounds like you've got a very. I mean, even without a villain, it sounds like you got a pretty interesting storyline going over there. So, nice. More power to you. That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Let's see here. Lore. I don't know. What do we want to do here? Let's see here. What? Let me check back, actually. Let me make sure I'm not going to just, like, repeat anything. What else have we said so far for our lore entries? So, journal. Okay, yeah, so we have this one journal entry that is sort of like someone accidentally documenting as their mind. Because the Duergar are basically, within my homebrew world, the Duergar are basically... the Duergar are basically dwarves, or at least they've started off as dwarves who slowly went insane due to the intense, crazy magic existing within the mountains that they're trapped in. And so we've got one that's sort of like a guy accidentally documenting his descent into madness. And so we've got a whole bunch of other things. I kind of want to just do something that is like a clear Duergar item. And I almost want to do something like, okay, here's an idea. It's kind of a useless item, but we can drop an item. Could throw down an item. If it's like an item that is engraved in Undercommon or something like that the Duergar speak, just to sort of like, I've basically been using Undercommon as a way to show like there's something here, but it's not speaking Dwarven like you would have expected, and that's supposed to be kind of like this hefty clue for them. Let's see here. Oh, gotcha. Well, Kickstand, I appreciate you stopping by anyway. Even if it was for a short time. Good luck getting through the rest of classes. I know, at least for me, if I were in school, my mind would not be focused being this close to a holiday break. So good luck to you. Okay, let's see here. So lore item. Let's just say. Let's see here. With the dangerous creatures of this room dispatched, you have the chance to look around and see what else is in the room. You notice lying on the ground we'll just go ahead and say we'll say a rusted short sword. Is it? Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it as one word. OneNote can just deal with the fact that it doesn't think short sword's a word. It is a word. We all know it's a word, and that's really what matters, is that we know what it is, and OneNote can just sit on it. So there. Alright, so rusted short sword. Say through the rust and grime, you see a few engraved words on the blade. The scratchings are uneven. Oh wow, okay. Well, fine. Scratched words are uneven. That was just me misspelling uneven. That one I'll admit to. I'll fess to. So the scratched words are uneven, as though carved on by the owner of the sword. However, actually, let's see here. Here's what we can do. We're gonna add a DM note here. If players know Undercommon, they can read that this is the name of the owner. And knowing my players, if they figure it out, they're going to want to know the name, because even though I'm just adding a random bit of lore, they're going to assume that it's somehow important and they need to return it to the owner or something crazy. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to fantasy name generators here. This is one of my favorite tools for writing stuff, because it is hard to come up with names and not eventually, just by following your own tendencies and idiosyncrasies in your own brain, it is hard to have them be unique. So let's just come up with some Durgar names. Barmar Molten Past. Why not? Doesn't matter. So, and I know my players are going to see that and then assume that there's something super important about it. And the fun part about that is you can kind of just yes and your way with it, right? If they do want to get obsessed with it and just won't let it go, then you can just say, sure, why not? And then when they get to Kagdaral, just like throw in a random clue like, oh, you find a backpack that has the name that matches it there. You found it. There's a mailbox, a Durgar mailbox that has Molten Past Estate written on it, and you can return it if they want to do that, or they can just be all like, huh, okay, that's weird. Let's see here. If they don't know it, DC 14 of whatever they think is relevant to try and decipher it, to identify that it is Undercommon they're looking at. So it's like, it's because it's lore and it's not essential. There's a lot of steps to how much information they can get out of this item, and so putting it behind checks and everything like that, I'm not super afraid to do that. And really the important clue for them is, even if they don't succeed at any of these things, if they don't speak Undercommon and no one gets a good history check or whatever they're going to use to try and determine what language it is, even if they don't succeed on that, they're still getting the necessary, they're still getting the information that I'm trying to present to them, which is that this item is not, like, this writing is not dwarven, right? This isn't the dwarven you would expect to find in this dungeon. And so it's providing that information, and it's a subtle clue. Um, but it's a set of really good clues, I think, because once players figure that out and that, like, sort of light bulb flicks on, they're gonna feel really good about having realized, like, oh, like, this isn't dwarven, there's something weird going on here. And then they'll get that sort of vindication when they eventually do realize there's Duragar here, not just like ancient forgotten dwarven things. So it kind of gives them that stuff. It gives them that sense of accomplishment. Even when they, like I say, with this one, even when they fail, they still kind of get information. And those are kind of my favorite types of clues and favorite types of roles, where it's like, regardless of how well they do, there's still relevant stuff they can learn. It's just more so about how much they learn from it, because that way you don't have to worry as much about the fact that there's meta knowledge. There's meta knowledge that they as players are going to get. So this is the type of clue I really like, and I think that'll work well. And I think we can just leave it as that. So let's go ahead and decorate our room now. Let's see, we need some objects here. Exactly. Having clues. That's one of the most valuable things I've kind of learned, and I kind of touched on this earlier, is rather than desperately trying to avoid meta knowledge, design dungeons understanding that meta knowledge is unavoidable. There will be stuff that players will just inevitably piece together. So rather than desperately trying to avoid it and find sneaky ways to stop your players from being intelligent human beings, right? Have ways for there to be both a metagame and non-metagame, right? So it's like, make sure that anything the players will eventually just figure out on their own is okay for them to learn. And then with their roles, have them learn extra things, as opposed to just being that, like, whether, like, the role shouldn't be, are you allowed to use what your logic lets you understand? Instead, have the role be like, do you get more beyond the obvious, right? Because it's like, it's obvious that it's not dwarven. I'm going to say to them right then and there, it's not dwarven, right? And so that's like the obvious thing, and anyone looking at it would be able to know that, because dwarven is a common enough language within this world that they'll be like, oh, if this were dwarven, I would at least know what the letters look like. Kind of like how, with me, I can look at, a piece of writing that has, different, like it can have, I don't know, the Russian alphabet, and be like, oh, yeah, that looks like it's probably Russian, right? Or I can look at Arabic script and be like, oh, yeah, that looks kind of like some sort of Arabic script. No idea how to read those. No idea whatsoever. But I'm familiar enough as a human with the world around me that I could look at that and be like, hey, that looks kind of familiar. Or alternatively, if someone's just written a bunch of scribbles on a piece of paper, I'd like to think that I'm generally smart enough. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But I'd like to think I'm smart enough to be able to look at it and be like, that's gibberish. That's not a language. Nope, that's not. And so that kind of general knowledge is free for players to have, and so I don't want them to have to pretend like they don't, pretend like their characters don't recognize that, or do recognize something else, and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. I'm kind of rambling about it at this point in time, but the point is, meta knowledge is fine. You just have to know how to use it properly. Just have at least a 10 intelligence and wisdom. Yes. Absolutely. I always like to equate intelligence to street smarts. Like, if they're smart enough to know how to navigate the hard, mean streets, then let's see. Okay, I gotta just find a. So one of the important things that I'm doing with this dungeon is I'm having each room have an entirely different statue, and the reason for that is, like, that's the one. It's not really gonna matter for players because, again, talking about meta knowledge, they've got the top-down view. They've got a map, and so they're always kind of aware of where they came from, because even playing online. So the reason I love using this tool is playing online. All of this will be blacked out until they go to each room to discover what's in each room, right? But even then, once they've been to a room, it'll just be dimmed out, but they'll still be able to see what rooms they've been in and where to go. So they always will have the context of where they came from and where they should think about going next, right? And so they kind of have the benefit of that. But thematically speaking, within this labyrinth, that's like the one concession that the dwarves would have given, is like you can use the statues if you're attentive enough. You can use the statues to try and figure out like which room did I come from? Have I been to this room or not before? And that's one of the tools that the dwarves would present to friends that are allowed to come to the city. They would say like, okay, yeah, you're gonna take the left door when you come to this statue, and then from that other statue you're gonna go straight across, you know, so on and so forth. But if you are not welcome, then you know you don't get that knowledge. But someone with maybe a 14 intelligence, to beat the dead horse there, they might notice that and use that as as a way to figure out. Oh, that's really big. Wow, these swords are huge. What on earth? Like, that's more of a sword size right there. 5-foot sword. This is a sword. Like, I mean, look at this. Hold on. I'm not letting this one go yet. Look at this sword. Look at this sword. The sword is over 5 feet long. Sword's almost as tall as me. Holy crap. Okay, just because of scale. Oh my god, look at that knife. Look at how big that knife is. That's just silly. Why haven't I noticed how big these things are? It's like a 4-foot knife. Oh my goodness. Alright, well, we're gonna... Okay, let's go back to sword. And then let's grab this, because that looked better. And then we're just gonna scale it down. Let's get it half the size. That's more like it. Lay our puzzle into the dungeon by having differences. Yeah, that's, you know, we could do something like that. I figure that's the type of puzzle that I'll leave to, like, the realm of yes and. If players start noticing that and want to utilize something like that, then 100% I would do that. The only reason that I don't do that is because we have multiple maps worth of stuff. My temptation would be to make it so it spans the entire dungeon, but I don't want my players to feel like they have to, like, I don't want to have to constantly, I don't want them to feel like they have to draw down a map or take extensive notes, and getting too complicated for that. Like, I would worry that it would get a little too difficult, and also then I'd have to describe each single statue, and I don't want to do that. It sounds like a lot of work. So no, I actually think that's a really good idea. And that's actually an idea. Probably what I'll do is, like, just if I'm being perfectly honest, I'll back pocket that idea and use it in a different dungeon. Because the other thing that I always try to do is I like to make my dungeons full of stuff, but I try to not use every good idea in a single dungeon. I try to have a dungeon be focused on 1 or 2 ideas and themes, so that way I have more material to work with later. Because an entire campaign, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, and it can get real monotonous real quick if I use all my good ideas all at once. Final Fantasy. Yeah, that's what all these are. These are all just Final Fantasy swords. For real. Boy. Yeah, so I do, as far as non-combat stuff goes, I do include in every set, I make sure there's at least 1 trap and 1 puzzle, but I try to have them more contained to a single room. Just so that way, and a lot of that too is giving players the opportunity to compartmentalize things, and also baking in a lot of decent stopping points so that whenever a group needs to, like, okay, it's like midnight and I have work tomorrow, we gotta stop, right? It's like there's a lot of opportunities to do that. So you're absolutely right. I do put a lot of those in there. I just kind of keep them smaller and limit them to 1 room. I like each room to be just sort of its own packet of adventure that can be handled and digested, and sort of the room-to-room interactions have to do with, 1, wandering monsters. I'll have those occasionally pop up, and then the other one is I usually will incorporate a lot of, like, so it's not really a puzzle type of system, and more so just you know, having to get an item that is used in another room. So it's like, you know, if there's a door that's locked, the key is hidden elsewhere, so they have to go through other rooms that are unlocked to find the proper key and then go through there. The other thing that I do, and this is very game mechanic-y, is I sort of include a compass type of item in the sense of like Legend of Zelda, where you find the compass and it shows you where all of the valuable things are in that dungeon. There's like a compass system, and so for each set of rooms, it's like there's a compass of some sort that exists in there that basically gives them information about whether or not they have done everything that is doable in each room. So it's like there is a lot of room to room interplay, but I try to not have I try to not require my players to think about like a cohesive puzzle that requires you to remember specific things from a specific room, because you never really know how much you're going to get through, and I don't like having to have players try and remember things in between sessions and all that kind of stuff. So the more you just sort of compartmentalize individual thoughts and puzzles, the smoother things go. Um, but I think that's not necessarily a right or wrong thing. I think it's more so a matter of what you and your players like, too, to add a little grain of salt to my take on it, because I think there can be a lot of really cool puzzles that require you. I mean, I mentioned the game Myst. Myst is 100%, about, hey, if you pull a lever in this room, something will happen on the other side of this island, right? And so there's a whole lot of other things that like that there's a lot of merit to that idea, and it's a really good one. And it just kind of comes down to what your group likes and how the cadence, the ebb and flow of different sessions and stuff goes for your players. Um, so I think that's a perfectly excellent idea. Um, I'm just not good at implementing it myself. Call it what it is. I'm not smart enough to make it work. Force walls, stop. Yeah, there's always that. That's a good point. If you have stubborn players that won't take no for an answer, that can really stymie the flow of a dungeon. I'm lucky. My group doesn't actually do that. If there's a door that's locked, and I think a lot of it is because I've made it very clear, and I have never faltered from the fact that if a door is locked, there exists somewhere a key to unlock it, right? If a door is, well, I should say if a door is, yeah, if a door is locked and they need to get, and they want to get to it, there exists a key somewhere. If they wanted to lockpick, I usually will allow them to lockpick their way through. I just always tell them, I was like, this game is made up of choices and consequences. So if you choose to bypass things and take the easy route through things, you're 100% allowed to do that. But you might miss important, valuable things, right? And so for that reason, my players tend to take the Skyrim approach of exploring a dungeon and checking every room anyway, because they like that completionist aspect. They like going through the game mechanics, and they love treasure. They love treasure, I'll tell you what. So I'm lucky in that sense. But the other thing that I'm lucky, and like I say, because I've made it clear to my players, if there's an important locked door, there exists a key for it. Because I don't want them, the flip side of it is, if they try to unlock a door and fail, I don't want that to halt their progress. So there will be a key for it, and because of that, they do tend to take finding the key as the easy route. But I think that's me being lucky and having very cooperative players that are willing to indulge me in how I've written things, and are willing to just sort of yes and their way through the dungeon. Like, I don't think it's wrong to try and brute force your way through a dungeon. It's the only wrong way to play D&D is to play it in the way that you don't want to play it, right? Like, that's the only wrong way. The right way is to play the game how you like to play it. So if your group likes to brute force things, then by all means do it. But my players really like the yes and concept of like, okay, I want to try and open this door. It's locked. And like, they might try and, well, can I try and lockpick it? It's like, sure. And then if they fail, they're like, well, we're not getting through this door. We better find a key. And then they'll go find other routes. So my players are really good about that. But I think I'm just a lucky son of a gun more than anything. Because I've been part of groups that are much more brute force murder hobo about it all, which it can be so funny in its own right. Especially when they brute force their way into a boss battle that they're not actually ready for yet, but if they had finished the dungeon, they would have the tools to be ready for. Like, I think that's hilarious. And that just kind of, again, is like, this game is made up of you making decisions and then dealing with the consequences. So if you're mentally prepared to go in there and possibly face negative consequences for trying to force your way through a door, then be my guest. Be my guest. And to me, that's just hilarious. I love that. I love my players, but I also love screwing with them. So watching them suffer in the bed that they made is there's a certain schadenfreude that I get out of that. All right, so this next room, wow, I can't spell medium today, apparently. Medium battle. Oh wait, hold on. Medium battles in this floor have 900 experience points to them. Alright, so we gotta figure out how we're gonna... Have we already done a medium battle in this one? I just want to make sure. I always want to make sure I'm not repeating the exact same battle. Just because every combination, every little combination, even if it's the same monsters, if you do them in different combination, it changes the dynamic of the fight. So I like to try and have them face as many, but it looks like we haven't done a medium battle yet, so we can kind of do whatever we want. We could just throw in 2 of the ochre jellies. I actually don't mind that, honestly. Nice, simple, straightforward. And those are for 50 XP apiece. There we go. Let's see here. Let's see here. First thing you notice walking into this room is the strong smell of mold. The air itself is damp and heavy. I'm just kind of riffing right now, honestly. One of the reasons I avoid having too many of these monotonous dungeons is it gets very tedious figuring out how to describe each room without just saying it's a square stone room. That's all they are, but it's like, dang it, I want to offer some sort of flavor, and I want it to at least feel like I put effort into this. I mean, come on now. It itself is damp and heavy, and there seems to be a film of, here we go, yellow slime over everything. There's no secrets about this. It's ochre jelly everywhere. You're in for it now. Alright, and then the reward here, just a good old-fashioned bag of money. Yeah, let's see here. Let's see here. Oh man, we're gonna offer a little bit of lore, and this one's gonna be really sad. I'm gonna mess with my players' heads on this one. Lying in the corner of this room is a small chest surrounded by 2 dwarven skeletons. It seems you've found a lost family. Sorry about that. Heard a thump coming from outside in the hallway. I think there's people moving. I think that's what the thump was, but I had to make sure it wasn't a knock at my door. Anyway, it spooked my cat. She's kind of freaking out right now. I don't know. It was a lot of noise, wasn't it? Anywho, okay, seems we found a lost family who died while trying to flee the city with their worldly possessions. Hold on, possessions? Is that it? Yeah, that's it. There we go. It's missing an S. Boom, there we go. Now they can deal with that sadness. Mess with my players hardcore. Hold on, I'm gonna keep this here put out just to make sure I'm not wrong about them knocking here. Felt with Electrum the most sought after currency. My players actively ask me, it's like, can we make inns and restaurants more expensive in this game so we don't have to screw around with copper and silver and we can just have everything cost gold? My players were actively willing to spend more money on everything, or rather than have to math out their money. Cracked me up. All right, let's see. Let's get ourselves some loot generated here. All right, so this is one of my favorite tools, the loot generator. Follow the link up here, 5e.tools loot gen. If you haven't used it, you should use it. It's someone, the team made it, and it does all of the rolling on the loot tables of the Dungeon Master's Guide for you. And it saves so much time, and it's so awesome. And you can just set the challenge rating wherever you want. That was for something else I was working on earlier today, because this is a level 4 dungeon that we're working on here. I keep it to the 1 to 4, so it's kind of a small treasure hoard, but they'll get bigger for the players as they go. But you can just roll loot, and then bada bing, bada boom. Look at that. Look at that right there. All right, let's just save some time. Copy and paste it here. Oops, no, I want that to be bullet points there. Okay, now, first things first. Get rid of that link there, because I won't use it. And then remove the link there. There we go. And now we'll just kind of clean this up. Come on now. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. And then I just kind of clean this up a little bit here. It's a lot of the physical descriptions of the stones. I like to offer them the unique stones. Put it in there, because the thing is, I'm writing this, so this campaign that I'm working on is not a campaign as I'm playing with my players right now. I'm playing a different campaign with my players, and I did that, and I'm writing a separate one on stream here exactly because I don't want my players, because sometimes my players will drop in and see what I'm working on, because some of them are pretty new to it, but getting into world building and DMing for themselves, so they'll come in and see sort of what my process is, because they know they like my games, so they can kind of use that as a way to sort of learn a little bit about the process. And so I don't want them to accidentally spoil anything for them. So because of that, I'm writing this dungeon for an unknown time in the future when I might play it. And so I try to write this with enough information and enough planning ahead that it can fit sort of whatever game we're doing in the future. So for the most part, players don't really care about individual gemstones and stuff like that. But different gemstones are used for different things in the rules as written. And so I try to make sure and still have that information there. So that way, if in the future when I am running this game, there's a different group, you know, I'm playing with a group that does want that detail, it's there and it's ready to go for me. And then if they don't want it, then we can just say up here, yeah, you find 8 gemstones, each of them worth 10 gold apiece. And boom, there you go. So, yeah, so that's the logic behind it. Potion of Superior Healing is a little intense there for level 4s, but hey, you know, why not? Why not give them a little treat? Okay, yeah, I can, so I'm definitely hearing it's definitely people working on, like, moving. And I'm actually, with the heavy thumping, I'm wondering if family moved out and they are now doing the usual rip out the carpet, replace the carpet because they had pets or something going on in my apartment complex, and I'm thinking that's probably what the banging is. Like I said, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't someone banging on my door needing me for something. Because if it's maintenance, then it's going to get even more awkward on stream, because then they're going to fling open the door, scream maintenance, and come in and do whatever they need to do anyway. Because I only rent, I do not own, so they can do whatever they want with this property, regardless of my emotions about it. Such is life as a renter. Okay, let's see. So let's go ahead and decorate this one a little bit here. Oops, we can probably get this back to our normal size here. Alright, just plop down our torches and everything. La da 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 da. There we go. Let's get our light going on in here. The light tool is kind of one of my favorite aspects of using Dungeon Draft here like this. I love that it has light that behaves, not like behaves sensibly and impacts how bright a room is and what players can see in the room based on how much like dark vision and light vision they have and all that kind of stuff. I absolutely love it. I absolutely love that. It's one of my favorite things about using this program in conjunction with Foundry Virtual Tabletop. Absolutely love it. Let's see. We need another thing. Have we used this one? I feel like I've used that one. Let me see here. Maybe I haven't. I guess not. Maybe I'm thinking about a different map that I made. I guess we have not used this one. I don't want it red though. I want it gray. There we go. I don't even know what this thing is supposed to be. Wait, what do they call it? Statue animal. It doesn't look like an animal. It looks like a humanoid. It looks like it might be some sort of like demon holding two sickles, right? I don't know. I should probably just not think about it too much. All right. Let's see. Let's do a couple skeletons here. Check it out. Well, no, that one's like shackled and manacled. I don't want to do that. Let's do skeleton, and then skeleton. Oh, there goes the cat. She saw the shadows of a couple birds, so now she's going to go hunt through the glass window there. And then let's see. We need a chest here. A nest, which is kind of the same thing as a chest, or a chess board, or singular chess piece. There's still more banging going on, although that sounded pretty metallic, like they were ripping out some sort of baseboard or something. Not baseboard, but you know what I mean. It's really noisy. I've never really considered how much noise it takes to rip apart an apartment. Alright, we'll put the chest right there. That's all of their family belongings. There we go. Now you can deal with that heartbreak there. I like to play psychological warfare with my players from time to time. Just from time to time. Nothing lasting, no permanent damage if I can avoid it. Just, you know, a little a little light trauma is all. It's such a horrible thing to say. I take it back. I immediately regret saying that. It just makes me sound like a terrible person. Alright. So that takes care of that room. On to the next one. See, here we go. We gotta come up with some sort of trap for this. Oh man, that's real fun. A nice trap in the very first room, because this is the room that they're gonna enter in through, right? So I gotta come up with a good trap for when they first walk in, which is gonna just be really funny, honestly. It's like, welcome to the next section. Better be on your toes. Alright, trap. What traps have I used so far? I'm pretty sure I used a spike trap at one point. And then I don't remember what the other trap I did was, so let's see if I can find it. Trap. Let's see here. Okay, yeah, so we did, oh yeah, okay, so we have like an acid trap. And then we had, pretty sure the other one was a spike trap, but I'm gonna find out and just make sure. Trap, yeah. Yep, there's a spike trap right there. And I think that's all we've done so far. Yeah, that's all we've done so far. Okay. So we've got an acid trap and we got a spike trap. Now I gotta think about some other kind of trap. Oh boy. Here's where I have to pretend to be more creative and smart than I actually am, which is, I mean, you can kind of pull that one off a little bit, but it's tough. It's tough to pretend to be smarter than you are, at least to sustain the act. Because it takes a certain amount of intelligence to be able to sustain the act. So if you're really dumb, then boy, oh boy. So we've done acid and spike, though. I'm just trying to think about, like, one thing that makes it a bit easier is think about who historically was the owner, operator of this dungeon or whatever, right? So in this one, we're talking about dwarves trying to set up traps to trap people in, trap intruders in, and stop them from getting to the city. So what kind of trap would they set to achieve that? Um, and so I feel like actually this one we could just do a trap that's really simple and doesn't actually even necessarily damage the players, just something that would get them stuck in there for a long period of time is the concept. And so it's like them as heroes would probably have more success getting out of it than the average person, right? The average soldier probably wouldn't be particularly adept at lock picking, but the rogue of the group is. So I'm thinking we can just have it be like you walk into the room and you hear the doors click as they lock shut behind you. And so the only way out is for them to pick the locks. And if they don't, and it's like, and what we can do is if they don't, then they have to rest there for the night, which then puts them at risk of long rest random encounters, so like wandering monsters and all that kind of stuff, right? And so I think, honestly, actually, I really like that idea because, like I say, it really fits with the theme of what this dungeon is and what the people who made this dungeon were trying to achieve. So as you all walk into the room, the door swings shut behind you, and you hear a chorus of clicking as all of the doors in this room lock shut. I feel about long rest giving back all the HP for the characters. I'm okay with it. As a general concept, I'm okay with it. But I think it's because I've learned how to work with it. Like I'm talking a lot about how you can make dungeons bigger and prolong them exactly to sort of counteract the ease of which, like players could always just say like, well, we'd like to bunker down and take a long rest, and the two elves that don't need a full 8 hours can take turns doing watches and stuff like that. So as a baseline, I don't mind it. The way that I make sure that it doesn't become an abusable, overpowered thing is, one, all the methods you've already talked about in terms of doing longer dungeons that will drain resources and all that kind of stuff. And the other thing that I do is I utilize, when players are taking a long rest, I do utilize random encounter tables. And if their long rest is interrupted by some sort of encounter or something like that, they don't get the benefits of that long rest, right? So I'll do that a lot. And then the flip side of that is I will, within a dungeon, offer up like a room or some way in which they can barricade themselves in, right? And so I will kind of offer that. You have to kind of mitigate that just so they don't always say like, okay, well, we'll go back to that room and barricade ourselves in, right? But you can use, basically what it is I will use random encounters to, at the very least, if they're like, oh, let's take a long rest. And so even if I'll let them take the long rest after the wandering monsters find them, they still have to deal with that. So if they're already struggling for resources and HP and all that kind of stuff, then it's like, okay, there's this one chance like the monsters might still get you even though you're planning on taking this long rest, right? You have to deal with this encounter before you get your benefits of the long rest. The other way to mitigate it and manage it is to have like if you're really concerned about it, and I haven't implemented that in this campaign yet, I might still do it at some point, but the other way to do it is to keep track of days that they're in a dungeon or adventuring or what have you, and have there be some sort of time limit on what they're doing. And my approach whenever I would want to take that would be have it be a generous time limit if they're not planning on taking any long rests, right? So it's like, if there's a dungeon that's a 2-day walk away, from the city or from wherever they got the mission, then it's like, okay, you have 1 week to finish that. So it's like 2 days to get there, 2 days back. That's 4 days, so then they've got 3 days to go through the dungeon, right? So that basically gives them 3 long rests in between travels to be able to get through the dungeon. So it's like they kind of have to meter them, and then if they fail, it starts cutting into their profits. It might be that their opportunity to succeed at all passes, and then they have to deal with the consequences of that, right? It's like if they've been ordered by the king to find something in 7 days, or else you're banished from the city, right? It's like you have 7 days to find proof that you didn't commit this crime, right? It's like, okay, they have to do that fast. They have to get on it, right? And so it's like you can offer up some time limits and things like that. So there's so as a baseline, just to kind of get focused back on the question here, how do I feel about long rest giving all the HP back? I think it's fine, but that's because I add the asterisks of I've learned to work with it and find other ways to offer the sort of crunch, the sort of pressure that I want them to feel without it necessarily just being related to HP. Um, so yeah, as a baseline, I don't mind it, and I think as a baseline, the reason I don't mind it also is because while it is a mechanism that can be easily abused, I think it's necessary if you want players to feel like things are possible without it just sort of resorting back to what we were talking about earlier with the concept of one or two easy battles, or one or two battles that are either easy peasy, take them down, or scary, run away, right? If you want to avoid that kind of stuff, right? If you want to avoid that kind of stuff, you have to find other ways to sort of mitigate and tear down their resources and everything like that. But then the flip side is they still need some way to be able to heal. Otherwise, it might take forever to get through a dungeon because they'll, again, just sort of keep running away and then coming back and running away and coming back. And so it's like if the long rest isn't there to be abused, there's some other mechanism that's there to be abused. So yeah, I guess ultimately I don't mind it. I think it's a necessary item to get in there to make sure that consistent progress can be made through a game. But I also think it's important to be aware that it's a mechanism that can be abused, and finding as DM ways to sort of stymie that abuse so that it doesn't destroy the spirit of the game or the dungeon or whatever you're trying to achieve with it. So how's that for like a long-winded nothing answer? That's a good question though. It's a good question. It is something that I think about a lot. Hi, Kitty. Do you want to snuggle? Okay. Kitty would like some attention, please. She's gonna come over here and get up in my grill, as she does. I know, hon. All right. So let's see here. And this room locked shut. Okay. Let's see here. We'll say no key for these locks, no mechanism, just locked doors. DC 14, that's the difficult. I keep using DC 14 for all of the, like 14, 12, and 11 are the 3 DCs that I'll use based on player level, just and how difficult I like my things to be. I sort of predetermine what the DCs are going to be for anything, and I do that so that way it's not just me arbitrarily coming up with a random number, because I always feel like that kind of undercuts the meaningfulness of how difficult is the dungeon supposed to be versus how advanced are my players, right? So it's like I've predetermined 11 is an easy check, 12 is a medium, and 14 is a difficult check. So I always just say DC 14 because I want this to be a difficult thing for them to get through. That's why I'm doing that. And then it also makes it so that I can be quick on the draw when players come up with something that I haven't scripted, right? Then I can just be like, yeah, give me a check. And if I'm like, yeah, I want this thing that they're trying sounds pretty hard, let's use the 14. Or it's like, oh yeah, they should probably check that just to make sure they're not a complete imbecile, but it's pretty easy, so 11. So that's where that number comes from, if anyone was wondering. Let's see here. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's definitely something that has to be considered, and I think that's one thing. I know when I was a new DM, and I think this goes for a lot of new DMs. When I was a DM, it was kind of a surprise and a frustration for me when I first started realizing how easy it was to abuse that system, for players to do that. I had never really thought about that when I was a player because it was just sort of, it's the obvious answer, right? It's the obvious answer, like, oh, I just used up 2 of my spells. We better take a long rest. And so you can just kind of arbitrarily, wherever you are, whenever, for any reason at all, just take a long rest, right? And so, like, it as a player, you don't think about it because it's a tool in the tool belt. You can use that. But as a DM, it definitely surprised me how frustrating it can be and how it can really undercut the danger and the intensity of a dungeon. So it's a really important thing to consider. And I agree with you, though. I think time is a really good one. Just like try and find a way to say like, hey, you've only got so much time. And I haven't baked that into this campaign, but I've thought to a certain degree that like, hey, they cut a deal with this dragon, right? To try and like, because that's what they're doing. They're trying to help this dragon because they were trying to build the road, and the dragon was all like, "No, I don't want you to build the road through my territory. I don't like humanoids. You guys always cause war and destruction wherever you guys go. I don't want you here." And then all of the people were like, "Oh, please." And he was like, "Okay, fine. I want to get into this one hall, the Hall of Wisdom. If you help me get in there, if you help me find all the keys to this place, I'll let you build your road." So they're trying to do that. So you can add sort of a sense of pressure, a sense of ultimatum. And probably what I'll do is once everything's written up, I'll go through and think about, okay, how long do I expect all of this to take? Add in another 10% buffer so players can feel free to do some side quests, do some side missions and stuff like that. But like math out all the time I would expect it to take, add that 10% buffer, and say the dragon says, okay, you have 2 months or 1 month or however many days that ends up being, right? You know, I'll give you this many weeks, just round it up to the nearest week or whatever. So you have this much time to get it done. Otherwise, I'm coming through and I'm eating all of you because I don't want you to build this road and if you're not going to reasonably help me, right? And so you can do that kind of thing, and then you can add sort of mechanics if the players are feeling pressed for it. Have them, every time they find a key, go to the dragon. The dragon's like, okay, you've clearly shown that you're meaning to do this. I'll give you a couple extra weeks to finish what's left, and they can kind of keep buying themselves some more time that way. But yeah, you can just kind of on a grand scheme do that kind of thing, and that's a fun way to do it too, because if you say, okay, you've got 2 in-game months, you've got 60 days in-game to do this, and they're like, got all the time in the world, we'll take our time and do all that kind of stuff, and then by the time they found the first key, they've already used up 30 days, and they're like, oh no, we're in trouble, and then suddenly there's a lot of pressure on them, and so that changes the tone of things. So that can be a really good way to do it, and it's probably how I'll end up mitigating a lot of things in this particular campaign. But that's kind of the type of thing I like to meter out at the end of it, because it's hard to know before you've written everything exactly how long it's going to take to get through everything, right? Because you might come up with a different idea, you might sort of like add in a puzzle as you're writing a puzzle and realize like, oh, this one's going to take some time, you know, or you sort of see how you've divvied up the dungeons, or you suddenly realize like, oh yeah, no, based on the travel they're going to do here, it's going to take a couple extra days just for the travel portion and all that kind of stuff. So blah 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 blah. There's a whole lot of reasons to do it at the end, but that's probably what I'll resort to for this campaign. So let's see here. So for this room, let's see here, DC 14 to unlock. If fail, have to spend the night, and either door can be opened by wandering monsters, or they can try unlock again in the morning. So just add some DM note stuff there. Okay, so this one in this room, that's actually really convenient for them. The first room they walk into, map. So one of the items that I give my players, and this has been a very popular addition to the games, especially in the online format, where it does as a baseline black out all of the rooms that they haven't been to yet. As I started including in every section of rooms, right, every floor or whatever of the dungeon. This cat's tail's about to smack me in the face here. My cat has a very active tail. It wags like a dog's, and it's super adorable, but also she hits me in the face with it a lot. Anyway, it's been a very popular addition to my players to include the opportunity in any given set of rooms to find a map, in which I will then reveal, like remove the fog of war and reveal the entire dungeon to them. And they love that because, it's a very game mechanic-y type thing, but it gives them the opportunity to sort of plan their route of attack, right? And I randomly assign what things can be found in what rooms, typically speaking. Unless I have a very good reason for a specific thing to be in a specific room, I'll randomly do it. And so sometimes they might be unlucky and they only find the map after they've already found like 9 or 10 of the rooms or whatever, right? But it's like, you know, there's the chance they can find it. Good Zelda game inspiration. Zelda dungeons are kind of my go-to in terms of figuring out how to structure and plot out a dungeon, right? In terms of what good, what things, what challenges and rewards to include in there. because they're just I always feel like they're a good balance between dungeon crawl without it being too tedious and monotonous, right? Because they have themed puzzles and rewards and items and all that kind of stuff. Like all of it kind of fits a theme, and there's not too many things, but there's sort of a consistency about them that give you the ability to say, like, just sort of like, again, it's metagamey, but just sort of understand the game mechanics and be like, okay, I know I'll probably still need to find this thing. Oh, I bet you there's still something here. Oh, I need to find this item to achieve this thing. They do a really good job of adding clarity while still having room for variety. So I definitely use Zelda Dungeons as a benchmark, as like a starting point for how I want things to go in any of my dungeons, and then sort of from there edit and change things. But yeah, no, that's been a very popular addition by my players, is the map. The trick is finding a way to describe it. I always try to have the map be kind of somewhat lore-like, and so that can be kind of difficult depending on it. But this one's pretty easy. Let's see here. Lying at the foot of this room's statue is a skeleton that looks dwarven in size. And see, now here we're kind of hiding a bit more lore in here. Clasped in its hands is a piece of paper with some markings and what appears there it is, to be a drawing of a map. And then we can take, let's see here, do that, because the markings are going to be in Undercommon. This is going to be a Durgar. I didn't want that as a simple bullet. Don't do these things to me. Let's see, we'll just say the map appears to correspond with this set of rooms that you currently find yourself in. A little meta there, but it's fine. The whole item is fine, is meta, so, you know, whatever. There we go. That looks better. Okay. Alright, so, and then there we go. So again, with the Undercommon and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, the loop back type of concept. Yeah, that's a very good point too. It definitely does a good job of making it so that if you re-explore part of a dungeon, there's a purpose to it rather than it just being sort of a grindy slog or something like that. Yeah, that's kind of the inspiration for the key mechanic within this dungeon, right? Because we have in this dungeon, we have all these different sets of rooms, right? And so it's like in the first set of rooms here, you find a key that unlocks these doors and grants you access to section 2. In section 2, you find the key that will then grant you access to these doors and up to section 3. And in section 3, you find the key that unlocks the rest of these and goes to section 4 there. So yeah, definitely that same concept of that as you put it, the loop back mechanism and stuff like that. I don't always approach it that way, but it's definitely one thing in the tool belt that can be used, and that I do use fairly frequently, for sure. All right, let's see. Let's decorate this room, and I'm looking at the time, and it is almost 1:30, or at least it's half hour after the hour, or to the hour. Either way, it's the same thing, which means it's almost time for me to wrap up writing here, so that we can then move on to my usual video game streaming. So I'm gonna decorate this room. And then we're probably going to call it a writing stream there. But we'll still make sure we get this room. It's always better to end with a room completely completed as opposed to still a little bit of stuff to do on it, because then I just won't remember what I was doing as well, and I might even forget to do it at all, and that's no good. So, okay, so now we need to find another statue. We just did that one. Have we done this demon one before? I don't think we have. But I'm gonna double check that goofy little gargoyle looking son of a gun. No, we have not. Now that guy, which is more of like a crab people type of thing going on there. So yeah, all right, here we go. Where did it go? Come here, demon friend. Do that, and then we need to go to use because we also need to put a skeleton at the foot. It's supposed to be dwarven in size, but here's what we'll do. I'm going to shrink this one down a little bit. Let's do 0.75 for it there. There we go. That looks kind of dwarven. And then we'll put it leaned against the statue right there. I wish I could have it be a bit more tucked under the demon statue arm there, but I can't have it be both under and over. This dungeon mapping software isn't quite that robust, which is fine. It realistically doesn't need to be. But we can do that, and then wait, check it out. We can check this. Wait. Paper, and then we can just like and then check this. We'll put this one underneath. And that's the map right there. Boom. There we go. Perfect. There, I actually really like that. I like that. That looks good. That looks good. What's up with Arcan Forge? Okay, yeah, with the dynamic fog of war. That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, that's like how I use Dungeon Draft and then play on Foundry. It's the same thing, so you can get that dynamic line of sight and fog of war and all that kind of stuff. As a DM, I absolutely love it. As my players, it tends to drive them insane because they wish they could see the whole map. But I'm like, buddies, that's what exploration's about. You got to go through and you got to earn seeing everything, right? Like that's your immersion right there, baby. Got to learn to embrace it. So, but there we go. Cool. I like that room. I think it looks like a good room. I think we made some good progress today. Got some good rooms done, and a lot of really good discussion today too. I'm into it. I'm into it. I love that kind of stuff. You know, if I said it once, I'll say it a million times. That's like the fun part of streaming this writing stuff, is being able to discuss different ideas and philosophies behind gaming and DMing and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, and I think it benefits everyone, right? Because when DMs are sharing ideas, or when players are getting ideas from DMs on how they can DM, it makes it makes DMs better, and it inspires new people to DM. And boy, do we need more DMs, because there's always a shortage of DMs, which is why, you know, people find themselves in that position of forever DM, right? Once you've proven that you can and are willing to do that role, everyone immediately just like gloms onto that, and it's like, oh boy, you're just gonna be a DM forever. So I love having the discussion because I feel like it inspires and broadens that pool of DMs, which is what we need, so that eventually one day, maybe, just maybe, I will be a player in a 5e campaign instead of a DM for it. I can't think of the last time I was a player in a 5e campaign. I'm currently a player in a Pathfinder game, which is fun, but a very different feel. As they call it, Mathfinder. Mathfinder is 100% about the crunching and the the stat blocks and everything, which is fun. But I want to play as a DM player, and one of these days, or as a D&D player, and one of these days, I'm hoping it'll happen. I know one of my players has gotten very into working and starting his own world building campaign writing process, and I've told him, I was like, you tell me the instant you're ready for it, and I will send a nuke down and kill all of our current players just so I can be a player again, because it has been so long. So one of these days, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I know it is. I know it is. My patience will pay off. I'm just kidding. Well, kind of kidding. I do want to be a player, but I actually genuinely love being a DM too. I have so much fun writing these worlds, and I have so much fun watching other people enjoy the worlds that I create. But anyway, all of that said, doing the Excel character sheets, yeah, no, you almost have to. You almost have to with those 3.5 or Pathfinder games. You almost have to, because they get so stat heavy. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. But okay, so looking at the time, it is now actually 1:30, which means that per the schedule that I wrote, and no one is enforcing, so really I can do whatever I want. But based on the schedule, that means that we are out of time for today's writing, which is fine. We've gotten quite a bit of good stuff done. A lot of fun today. I appreciate it. What's going to happen is I'm going to take a 15-20 minute break, rest my voice a little bit, get something new to drink, and then I'm going to sit down and we're going to do some gaming. I am currently playing through Neverwinter Nights, the sort of enhanced edition that was re-released not long ago. And so we're playing through that. So if you want to see me kind of be a player in D&D, I guess you can hang out for that and watch me struggle bust my way through that one. Um, but that's what's going to happen for the rest of today's streaming. As far as the rest of this week goes, it's a little odd this week. The schedule's a little different because we're on a holiday week. It is Thanksgiving, or at least in my part of the world here in the U.S., it's Thanksgiving week, and so I have to leave town and go visit family midway through the week. So instead of doing my usual Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday streams, this week I am doing Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday streams, and then nothing Thursday and Friday, so I can go spend time with family. So that's what's coming up with with my streams this week. The times will be the same: 11:30 Eastern time for writing and 1:30 p.m. Eastern time for gaming. Those times are staying the same. We're just, again, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday this week. So yeah, with that in mind, good writing stream today. Got a lot of good stuff done. To say, a lot of fun, a lot of good, awesome discussion today. I love it. Absolutely a fan of that. Absolutely a fan of all you guys who stopped in. I appreciate you guys. So if you want to stick around for some gaming, then check back in, and like I say, maybe 15-20 minutes, and we'll be back for a little bit of writing, or not writing, we just did writing, for a little bit of gaming. Or if you're just here for the D&D writing, I totally understand. That is totally fine. You can tune in tomorrow or Wednesday this week to see a bit more of what I'm working on. But I think that's all I got. Oh, I guess just the other announcements too. I do have my Discord and my YouTube channel. If either of those are interesting to you, if they sound like they'd be something that you would care about. This cat is like tail whipping my microphone. I'm sorry. If that's what you're interested in, then you can find the links to those on my Twitch page, and you can get yourself. You can check those out. And I think that is finally all the announcements. So again, appreciate each and every one of you guys. You guys are rad people. So much fun sitting here working on stuff, discussing stuff with you guys. I love it. Looking forward to doing it again tomorrow. And yeah, I'll either see you in 20 minutes or I'll see you next time you log in. Either way, I appreciate you guys. Appreciate your attention, and yeah, I'll be back in a little bit. So see you soon.